What the medical examiner's office noted was that Dejah's neck was fractured, that she had over 58 stab wounds to her body by a sharp object. Further investigation revealed that there had been social media posts by the defendant questioning whether he was the father of the child, questioning whether he should have a DNA test, and also stating that he was mad at Dejah, and I would suggest providing motive.
When investigators questioned Leonard Robinson in the days following Thanksgiving 2021, he told them he had not seen Dejah Jenkins-Minus in 2 weeks. That was his first statement. His second statement was different. In his revised account, she had come to his home that Thursday morning, but he had not let her in. She had turned around, he said. She had left. Neither statement would survive contact with the evidence. By the time detectives had finished examining the GPS data, the surveillance footage, and what was recovered inside that locked bedroom on Lowell Street, both versions of Leonard Robinson's story had collapsed entirely. This is the documented case of Dejah Jenkins-Minus. This is morbid true crime. Detailed documentary investigations focused on criminal psychology, forensic evidence, and procedural analysis.
A Lowell man is now being held without bail, accused of murdering a young mother in her home. As WBZ's Nick Giovanni tells us, the suspect's social media posts may reveal a motive.
22-year-old Leonard Robinson stood before a judge inside Lowell District Court Tuesday morning to face the charge of murder for the death of 22-year-old Dejah Jenkins-Minus.
Dejah Jenkins-Minus was 22 years old and living in Boston, Massachusetts, in the fall of 2021. By every documented account, her life at that point was anchored almost entirely around a single focus: her daughter, born just 2 months earlier in September. Her mother, Latoya Minus, later described Dejah to reporters as a very uplifting young lady.
She's very outgoing, she's loving, she's a very uplifting young lady.
Family members and people who knew her consistently described someone determined, hardworking, and deeply committed to her child. She had a family home in the Mattapan neighborhood of Boston, a support network, and a holiday gathering planned for Thanksgiving Day. None of that changed what happened in the early hours of November 25th. The relationship between Dejah and Leonard Robinson had been ongoing, though not stable. Investigators and prosecutors would later describe it as on again, off again. Robinson, also 22, lived in Lowell, roughly 30 miles north of Boston. He was the father of Dejah's infant daughter. What the investigation would eventually document was that in the weeks before Thanksgiving, something in that relationship had shifted. The evidence of that shift would later be found not in conversations between the two of them, but in what Robinson had been posting publicly. Before Thanksgiving ever arrived, Leonard Robinson was operating under significant legal constraints. Court records established that Robinson was on conditional release from Suffolk Superior Court at the time, released pending charges related to illegal firearms possession. As a condition of that release, he had been ordered to wear a GPS monitoring bracelet and comply with a curfew. He had prior convictions involving violent offenses and had been denied bail in earlier proceedings, specifically because of that history. The GPS requirement was not incidental. It meant that Robinson's movements on any given day were documented, logged automatically, time-stamped, and accessible to investigators. That detail would become one of the most significant pieces of evidence in the case. It also raises a question that becomes harder to answer the more closely you examine the timeline. What was Dejah Jenkins-Minus told or not told about the circumstances of the man she was driving to see at 1 in the morning with her 2-month-old daughter? The investigation did not resolve that question. What it did resolve was the sequence of what followed. Shortly before 1 a.m. on November 25, 2021, Thanksgiving morning, Dejah Jenkins-Minus left her home in Boston. According to prosecutors, the two had exchanged text messages that evening. What those messages contained has not been made fully public, but they were sufficient to bring Dejah to Robinson's address on Lowell Street in Lowell in the early hours of the holiday, with her infant daughter, a diaper bag, and a baby carrier. A neighbor who lived directly across the street, Roger Rondeau, was still awake. He saw her arrive. He watched her bring in the baby, the carrier, and the bag. He watched Robinson open the door and let her in. Rondo later told reporters he had a feeling something wasn't right. He couldn't say exactly why. She was arriving at 3 in the morning with a newborn. That alone struck him as unusual. He went back to his own Thanksgiving. What happened inside that home between approximately 1 a.m. and early afternoon on Thanksgiving Day is not fully documented in the public record. What is documented is what happened after. At approximately 1:50 p.m. that Thursday, Rondo looked out and noticed something. Robinson was sitting in the driver's seat of Dejah's car, parked outside the house. He stayed there for 15 to 20 minutes. Surveillance footage captured what came next. The car left Lowell Street at approximately 2 p.m. Dejah Jenkins-Minus was not in it. According to the GPS monitoring data reviewed by prosecutors, Robinson's tracker placed him at the Lowell Street home until roughly 2 p.m., consistent with the neighbor's observation and the surveillance footage. The data then showed him driving south on Interstate 93, arriving in the Dorchester neighborhood of Boston by 3 p.m. At 4:56 p.m., the GPS signal stopped. Prosecutors stated in court that the device appeared to have been deliberately removed at that point. Back in Boston, Dejah's family was waiting. She had been expected for Thanksgiving dinner. She hadn't arrived, and she wasn't answering her phone. As the evening went on, the absence became harder to explain away. Family members pulled up a tracking application linked to Dejah's phone. The signal placed her phone at the Lowell Street address in Lowell, the same address where she had been seen arriving hours earlier. Relatives drove out to the house, twice according to court documents. Both times the house appeared dark. Her car was not there. There was no response. They returned home, but the phone wasn't moving. By the following morning, Friday, November 26th, Dejah's family contacted Lowell police and requested a welfare check. They explained the situation. She had gone to that address the previous day, had never returned, and her phone was still showing as located there. Officers responded to Lowell Street at approximately 10:45 a.m. The home on Lowell Street was where Robinson lived alone. When officers arrived, there was no immediate answer. A family member of Robinson also came to the property during this period. That individual entered the home through a window. Inside, they found a locked bedroom door. Court documents describe what followed in precise terms. The family member began hitting the door, then kicking it. Eventually, the door gave way. Dejah Jenkins-Minus was on the floor beside an air mattress. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Lowell police immediately secured the property. The Middlesex District Attorney's Office was notified. The Massachusetts State Police were called in to assist. A medical examiner was summoned. The infant daughter, Dejah's 2-month-old, was not in the home. She was located later that day in Boston, unharmed. On Saturday, November 27th, investigators executed a search warrant at the Lowell Street home. Among the items recovered was a knife. According to prosecutors, it appeared consistent with the injuries documented on the victim. The medical examiner's findings, released in the days that followed, established the official cause of death: homicide by multiple sharp force injuries. Autopsy results further documented the extent of the injuries. Prosecutors later stated in open court that Dejah Jenkins-Minus had sustained more than 58 separate stab wounds. Her neck had been fractured. The court would hear those details during Robinson's arraignment.
A Lowell man is now being held without bail, accused of murdering a young mother in her home.
What we have in this situation, Your Honor, is that Dejah is found in the house that he was living in alone, in his bedroom, which was locked when any witness or the police came to that location. What the medical examiner's office noted was that Dejah's neck was fractured, that she had over 58 stab wounds to her body by a sharp object. Further investigation revealed that there had been social media posts by the defendant questioning whether he was the father of the child, questioning whether he should have a DNA test, and also stating that he was mad at Dejah, and I would suggest providing motive.
Middlesex County Assistant District Attorney Thomas Brandt presented them as part of the prosecution's initial case narrative. The medical examiner's ruling removed any ambiguity about whether this had been an accident, a medical event, or something else. The cause was documented, the manner was established, and the evidence recovered at the scene was being processed. What remained was identifying and locating Leonard Robinson. Robinson had not been difficult to find, relatively speaking. The challenge was building the evidentiary case quickly enough to support an arrest. The GPS data was central to that effort. Because Robinson had been required to wear a monitoring device as a condition of his court release, investigators already had an electronic record of his movements on Thanksgiving Day, up until the point the signal was cut. That record placed him at the home during the window when Dejah was last seen alive, documented his departure in her vehicle, and then showed the device going offline. The surveillance footage from the street corroborated the timeline. The neighbor's eyewitness account corroborated it further. Then investigators turned to social media. What they found there became a significant part of the prosecution's motive argument. According to prosecutors, Robinson had made a series of posts in the period leading up to Thanksgiving in which he publicly questioned whether he was the biological father of Dejah's child. He had raised the possibility of demanding a DNA test, and he had stated in documented posts that he was angry at Dejah. ADA Brandt presented this to the court at arraignment as evidence of motive, a documented emotional state that investigators had found publicly available and that directly preceded the events of November 25th. The combination of physical evidence, electronic tracking data, witness accounts, and digital records was enough. On November 29, 2021, 4 days after Thanksgiving, Leonard Robinson was located in Boston and arrested without incident. Robinson was arraigned on November 30, 2021, in Lowell District Court. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney declined to comment publicly following the hearing. It was during this proceeding that the prosecution laid out the key contradictions in Robinson's account. When initially questioned after his arrest, Robinson had told investigators he had not seen Dejah in approximately 2 weeks. That was his first statement, a denial of any contact. His second statement contradicted the first. In this version, he acknowledged that Dejah had come to his home on Thanksgiving morning, but he said he had not let her in. She had arrived, and he had turned her away. She had left. ADA Brandt addressed both statements directly in court, then walked through the evidence that dismantled them. The neighbor had seen her go inside. The GPS had placed Robinson at the home. The surveillance footage showed Robinson leaving in her car hours later, alone, and Dejah's body had been found locked inside Robinson's bedroom. Robinson was ordered held without bail. A probable cause hearing was scheduled for December 30, 2021. The legal proceedings that followed moved through the Massachusetts court system over the subsequent months and years. As of the most recent available public reporting, Leonard Robinson remained charged with murder in connection with Dejah's death. The case was pending trial as of 2023. Court records through the Middlesex County system would reflect any developments since that point, and the family had described the wait for resolution as an ongoing wait. What the documented record makes clear, separate from the legal outcome, is the architecture of what occurred. Dejah Jenkins-Minus drove to Lowell at 1 a.m. on a holiday with her infant because someone she had a complicated history with had reached out. She brought her child. She was expected back in a matter of hours. The phone app her family used to find her was the same technology that had been designed to help people locate one another when something goes wrong. In this case, it led them to a locked door. The GPS system monitoring Robinson's movements, court-ordered because of his history, became the spine of the investigative timeline. Without it, the sequence of events between her arrival and the discovery of her body would have been far harder to reconstruct. What investigators ultimately assembled was not a case full of unknowns. It was a case where almost every significant piece of evidence pointed in the same direction, and where the suspect's own account fractured the moment it was placed alongside that evidence. What the investigation documented ultimately was not a sudden or inexplicable event. The social media posts came first, public expressions of doubt, anger, and resentment, directed at the mother of a child Robinson had publicly questioned, claiming. Then came the text messages. Then the drive at 1 in the morning. Then the locked door. Investigators were not reconstructing a mystery so much as a sequence, a series of documented choices that each led to the next, and that collectively produced an outcome recorded in a medical examiner's report and a stack of court filings. Dejah Jenkins-Minus's mother told reporters she was lost, hurt, numb, and angry, and that she wanted justice for her daughter and her granddaughter. Her granddaughter, Dejah's 2-month-old, was found safe. She will grow up without her mother. This has been Morbid True Crime, where documented evidence, investigative procedure, and behavioral analysis come together to reconstruct complex cases. If you found this investigation valuable, please subscribe and leave a comment below. New documentary investigations are published regularly on this channel.